Hello and welcome back to the Pretty Serious Bike Racing Podcast for Monday, May 22nd. We're here recording on the afternoon of Sunday, May 21st. And it's the heart of stage racing season. It's a great time of year. We've been able to watch both the Vuelta a Burgos and the Giro d'Italia this weekend. Lots to talk about today. And I can't wait to get into it. As ever, I can't wait for my weekly conversation, my Sunday conversation with none other than bike racing analyst extraordinaire, Cosmo Catalano. Cosmo, how are you?
I am well, Dane. I'm sitting in a very tiny rocking chair that my great-grandmother had custom made for her.
That's just awesome color for the podcast. I'm so glad that you shared that with us. Where are you?
I'm in my parents' house in Williamstown, Massachusetts.
Amazing. Which, when you shared that information with me earlier, I looked this up. It's just a beautiful, idyllic, historic town in western Massachusetts. Really, really cool. I'm also joined this week for the second week in a row. What a treat. Abby Mickey, welcome back. Abby Mickey, host of the Wheel Talk podcast, former professional bike racer, now amazing podcast host herself, and occasionally she graces us with her presence on this show. Abby, how's it going?
Good. I'm also in my parents' house, so that's funny. Which is also in a historic town.
That's great news.
Yeah.
I don't think you're in your parents' house, Kit, but you're in a very historic place. Live from Edinburgh. Well, not live, because I'm going to edit this podcast.
Confirmed.
More history where Kit is than all of us.
Yeah. Okay, well, from Edinburgh, cycling journalist Kit Nicholson, welcome to the podcast. Kit, how are you?
I'm right, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
It's great to have you back. So we have bike races in both Spain and Italy that are going to take most of our attention today. I think we should start with the Vuelta a Burgos because it's already over, and I wish there were more to talk about, but it was kind of another dominant performance by a team that keeps doing that over and over again. I don't think there's really that much effort required to condense what's going on in this race. Cosmo, what happened at the Vuelta a Burgos?
We have to savor the variety of different dominances we were subjected to. Whereas there was a sprint on stage one, won convincingly by Lorena Vivas. There was a crosswind day on stage two where SD Works put the field to ribbons. And then Lorena Vivas briefly won the sprint, and then they decided she had done something wrong, although I don't think anyone specified what that was. And so Demi Vollering won that stage. Vivas won another stage, catching the break in the last 10 meters of the stage, which was amazing to watch. And then Demi Vollering kind of took everyone to school on a final uphill climb. We saw a spirited competition for the lower steps of the podium. But yeah, just really start to finish, all SD Works all the time.
For me, this race was sort of an example of what happens when Demi Vollering has a clear shot at a stage race win without any sort of nature break, attack, controversy, shenanigans, or somebody else from her own team getting the win. She's that much better than everybody else. It's a 2-minute plus gap to the rest of the peloton, minus Annemiek van Vleuten. And at this race, I think we really got to see what happens when she has a clear shot at a field that isn't quite as good as it was at the Vuelta Femenina. In a wonderful part of Spain. For the wine fans, very close to the Ribera del Duero wine region, by the way. Yeah, Abby's shaking her head, but she agreed to come onto the podcast so she can deal with my history nerddom. But yeah, Demi Vollering, this is what happens when she has a clear shot. And I think it's just another example of her being the clear best rider in the world right now and probably the favorite for really anything she sets her mind to at the moment.
I went back and looked at her results for the season, and she has won 11 of the 20 races that she's participated in. But in those 20 races, she's only finished outside of the top 10 4 times. And her worst result all season was stage 1 or 3 of Burgos, where she finished 22nd. It was just like crazy.
It's such a telling example of how good she is across the board, her variety of talents, because there are a lot of sort of GC dominant riders on the men's side. This is especially true 5 years ago, where they would dominate on the days they dominate, and then they would relax, take it easy. And yeah, I guess the stages where she hasn't finished that highly, partially because she's letting a teammate crush everybody. She generally is up there no matter what the profile is.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out is she did a ton of work for Vibis in some of these intermediate stages, or these sprint stages. She was, the last person who did a huge pull to get Vibis to catch that break on stage 3. She was leading out the finish on stage 2 where there was the bad relegation. There was a little narrow section of smooth kind of, I don't know if it was concrete or if it was rock slabs, but there was a narrow smooth section, and she did all the work kind of posting up at the front of that and just hammering it and forcing everyone who wasn't Lorena Vivas to kind of come around on some cobblestones. It's not like she's been sitting back and waiting for the GC days. She's been super active, trying to get the pack to work together, doing turns at the front. It's just incredible to watch.
Yeah, I think it's incredible to watch now, but there is a little bit of we're like sitting on a rope right now on whether or not this is going to get boring. I think like right now she's so fresh in the sport. This is her 5th year in the World Tour, her 3rd year on SC Works. Like she's really fresh still to the sport, and it's not like the same feeling as when Van Vleuten is dominant, but I do think that like someone needs to challenge her soon, otherwise it's going to get a little bit tiring. And I think we're going to see that coming up, especially at the Tour de France Femme. But there's a lot going on in the peloton this year that is really fueling SC Works dominance. Like we have Trek with a super reduced team that is only now kind of building back into the season with riders coming back from injury and riders coming back from illness and stuff. And like Shirin Van Anrooy had an incredible race. She finished 2nd overall after a really strong performance on the final stage, but she's not really a climber. So it was cool to see her hang on to Demi as long as she could and still finish the day really strong. And I think like Trek is in the process of rebuilding and had they had their team at full strength in the beginning of the year, they would have definitely challenged SC Works, and it wouldn't have been as dominant an SC Works Classics campaign. But we had Movistar in a weird position where they do have Classics riders, but like a couple of them were out. Emma Norsgaard was out with a broken collarbone. We have Annemiek van Vleuten not doing as well as she has, or the peloton rising to meet her, as I spoke with Emma a couple week ago or so on the Wheel Talk podcast. We've just got a couple teams that are so close to being able to compete, and I think that there's just this really interesting situation where SC Works is just very, very lucky right now. And I don't think it's that they are that much better than everyone else. They've always been this good. And Danny Stam is just like unreal good at picking riders to sign for this team, and he always has been. But there were a couple years there where Trek Segafredo was really challenging SC Works to be the best team in the peloton. They won the World Tour rankings one year as well. But it's just like this year has been a weird year for the peloton, but it's been not a weird year for SC Works. And because of that, it just seems like we have this incredibly strong team that is unbeatable. But they are beatable. I feel like if you look at the 2 riders that dominated Burgos between Vollering and Wiebes, because they won all the stages between the 2 of them, Wiebes is unbeatable. Like she cannot be beat unless she's relegated. Like she is so good at sprinting, and the only rider who could really challenge her last year was Elisa Bosma, who's really not got the kick that she had before this year. She was so impressive last year, and this year she's just not got that extra 2% to be able to beat Wiebes. Especially on stage 1, you saw like she just can't sprint as fast as Wiebes. And I think she has the ability to do it, but just she's not. So far this season, we haven't seen it from her. And there's no one else in the peloton who can compete with that sprint except Cool. And they just really are not going to take her to any races unless she's going to win. That's just how DSM like does it. And so I don't see Vollering as being as unbeatable, I guess, because I think that in my mind, there's like 10 riders that are just like, that just need like 2%. And then it's going to be just like an epic mountain battle to see who wins the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift.
And the focus on the July racing is a relatively new phenomenon over the past decade or so. So it is tough to say whether...
over the last 12 months.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's tough to say, therefore, whether the rest of the peloton just hasn't been up to speed, I mean, literally, because they're waiting to get, to peak at that time of year. So I think there's some suspense there. You pointed out Trek Segafredo as sort of a major challenger, and I do think we've seen both, and honestly, in the past month, we've seen kind of both of the up-and-comer potential challengers on the climbs, Gaia Realini and Shirin Van Anrooy, who are both very, very young. I mean, as young as really so many of the riders at the top right now are. They are, even for that, they're very young. And I think there is some hope there as they continue to get better. Yes, they were way behind SD Works in these races, but still, they are up and coming, and you would think they're only going to get better.
Yeah, I think it's also worth pointing out that, for example, if you look at this race in particular, you've got riders like Ashley Mompasio, who will definitely be able to compete on climbs coming up, but her and Demi took a completely different approach to this race. This was Ashley's first World Tour race back after Liège-Bastogne-Liège. She won Durango, the midweek Pro Tour, or whatever the one step down races are ranked. She won that race, so she's on good form, but she's definitely at the base of her peak going into the July racing season. And the Giro, I would assume that she's racing the Giro based on how she's building. And then you've got Demi, who just raced all the Ardennes. She raced the Vuelta Femenina. She raced at Zulia and Burgos, and now she's taking time away from racing to refocus. So you've got riders like Ashley, who are looking, and Shirin, honestly, who are looking to peak later and are kind of building up to that, and riders like Demi, who's just ending her first peak of the season. And so that's, in that sense, this race was kind of not a great indication of what the battles are going to be to come, because it's two completely different approaches to this race in particular. And like we saw, the GC competition was reduced to 7 kilometers on the final stage.
There was a little action in that crosswind stage, and the people who finished second and third today were both on UAE ADQ, and didn't really seem to work together at all, and still finished pretty well. And I don't think they would have been able to challenge Vollering, but it would have been a lot more interesting if they hadn't lost 3 minutes. Basically, I can't remember a specific moment at which they were all dropped on that crosswind day, but I feel like there are kind of a lot of teams in that same position where they have talent, they have strong riders, and they just don't seem to be kind of as dialed and as focused on working together as a SD Works or a Trek. And I'm wondering if just better organization might help, someone like Silvia Persico perform a little better in overall standings.
Yeah, UAE had a shocker of a race, because the stage 2, the day that there were crosswinds, they all lost a ton of time. And Silvia Persico climbed super well on the 4th stage. Erica McNulty had probably one of the best performances that she's had all year, and including last year. But the team is still relatively new, and I think that management is having a hard time harnessing the talent that they have on the team, because they do have some incredibly strong riders, but they're so bad at working as a unit that you don't even really think about them when it comes to teams that are going to be able to compete against SD Works. And it sucks, because Persico is incredibly talented. She would have finished second overall if they had just played their cards a little bit better. And that's kind of a bummer to see. I don't know. She's signed through 2025. Yeah, she signed through 2025 with UAE. So she's still got, 2.5 more seasons with them. And you'd think that there are other teams that are super interested in signing her. She could do really well on other teams, but it'll be interesting to see if that team can figure out how to support her. And FDJ Suez also just had a horrific day on stage 2 and lost a ton of time. And they still didn't have much in the way of general classification competition. Cecily Uttrup-Ludwig returned to the peloton for the first time since the Ardennes, and she didn't have that great of a race. She got dropped from that like group fighting for second and third on the day on the final stage. So she's not climbing as well as we saw her last year. But again, same as Ashley, she's building into the Tour, and she's targeting like the Tour and the Tour of Scandinavia that are later in the season. So she's not going to be on her best form yet, or that would be way too early.
A rider who surprised me at this race was specifically because of her climbing, was Chloe Dygert. She has done a really impressive job of kind of showing off that, yes, she has all that power that we know she has. She barely ever races in the top level races in Europe. And part of that's because of all the injuries. But I was still very surprised at how well she was climbing in this race. The fact that she was able to, at the end of the day, finish 4th overall. She was 9th on that final stage to Lagunas de Nela. And should I be surprised, Abby? I mean, this seems like something that we haven't seen her do that much before at this level in the past.
I don't think you should be surprised, given the climb itself was 11K long, but only 7 kilometers of it was actually raced. And it's not a super steep climb. So her ability to put down just ridiculous power on a climb like this, it totally makes sense. If it had been a bit steeper, if she was racing at Planche de Belfi, I would agree with you. I'd be shocked to see her finish 9th. But I think for a climb like this, it's not that surprising to see her finish super well. It's like, if you think about the fact that this is only her second European stage race in her life. When she started stage 1, it was only her 5th race day in 2 years. And she was able to finish 4th overall. That is insane. Like, that is so impressive. She has basically no ability in the peloton at all. She's coming from the US, which is basically, pelotons of 60 people that ride on massive roads. So it's not even comparable to what she's experiencing right now in Europe. And she's not raced with this team that she's been on since 2021 at all, since she signed with the team. And to be able to come into a race like Burgos, granted, it doesn't have the biggest competition when it comes to the general classification. But this kind of performance has me really curious about how she's going to perform at the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, because you have to imagine that Canyon SRAM is looking at how she's been able to perform this race. I mean, finishing second/third, and 9th on 3 stages of this race and 4th overall, like they for sure are taking her to the Tour. I would be absolutely shocked if they didn't take her. There would have to be some kind of internal conflict for them to not take her to the Tour, because she's so close to winning a stage. Like, if she can just if she can use her power a little bit better, then it will be, she could run away with stage wins. Like, but she just needs to learn how to race a bike in Europe a little bit. But even without any knowledge about how to race a bike in Europe, she got 4th overall at a World Tour stage race, and that is bonkers. I cannot even explain to you how crazy that is.
It's mind-blowing. She's riding at 60% of what she could be doing, because she's doing it so badly. She's doing these 700-meter sprints where she's all over the road. She almost took out Vollering on stage 1. She's just she's just oh, there's some space, I'm going to pedal really hard. And she's finishing top 3 in sprints. On the Crosswinds day, she was sitting at the back of the field as riders in front of her got tailed off. And she just stood up and rode around them and got back to the group. And I was like, that isn't supposed to be possible. Crosswinds are to punish you for riding like that, and it just does not matter to her. I almost feel like she's doing intervals or fartlek training or something, where she's oh, there's another gap, I better go close it, and then another gap forms. Oh, I better go close it.
She reminds me of Evie Stevens, because Evie Stevens, whenever you were in the peloton with her, if you looked to your side and you saw Evie Stevens, you were about to get dropped, but she would then go on to win the race. And that's always how it happened. But Chloe is just, what is it about Americans? They just can't ride in a peloton to save their lives.
Our roads are too wide.
So
wide roads.
Strong.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, she's as much as I am conflicted to say it, she is incredibly impressive on the bike.
With that, let's jump over to the Giro, where, as of recording time on Sunday afternoon, well, Cosmo, what is going on at the Giro as of recording time on Sunday?
there's a different guy in pink. Everything else is kind of the same.
Oh man,
it's been a very chill couple of days. We've had a lot of breakaway finishes. We had 2 breakaway finishes won by the same person. We've had a real solid cast of characters, probably 5 or 6 guys putting on an amazing bike race, and everyone else just doing as little as possible, which maybe sounds like a slight, but it's been really hard. It's been horrible weather. It's been cold. There haven't been, according to the riders, there haven't been a ton of opportunities to take time, a lot of headwinds, kind of on uphill finishes. Thomas inherited the jersey when Evan de Poel dropped out, and he kind of handed it off to Bruno MRI to give his team a little breather. But it's been a cold race. Like it's almost been like a series of classics, which cool finishes, but not. Yeah, the GC battle has been really, really quiet.
Yeah, the biggest things that have happened in the GC so far in this race have been, one, Remco Evenepoel leaving the race with COVID, and then Theo Gegenhardt leaving the race because he broke his hip in a crash and left that for that reason. So other than that, there really haven't been that many attacks. There hasn't been that much action, honestly. I think the weather has played a big role. We saw a stage shortened by the weather, potentially what would have been maybe the biggest GC stage in the second week into Switzerland. They had to shorten that stage, but it's been very entertaining in the breakaway. The stage battles have been great, but yeah, I think, Cosmo, you were already saying last week you were not that entertained by the GC battle, and I have to say this week I felt very similarly.
I would say that the most interesting GC story for me has been Andreas Leknessund, who of course wore the pink jersey for a few days, but he's also just sticking with the main contenders, which is, I mean, I would be surprised if he lands a top 5, but I would also not be all that surprised because he is really managing to, hang around with Roglic. And, when Pinot and co got dropped by 2 seconds today, he was very much in the wheels where he needed to be if he's going to be, staying where he is in the top 10. But yeah, also, I mean, on the drama, which has been potentially limited, and I think, it has obviously been an incredibly miserable race, and it just looks like a matter of survival for so many of them. What I keep finding myself thinking is back to last year's Giro when we had, I don't know, 3 or 4 short, fast stages, quite often with a circuit finish, that were thrillers. And yeah, the GC battle wasn't necessarily electric, but I remember Bora Hansgrohe really putting the hammer down on one of those short stages, and it's when we really were made to think, oh, hang on, maybe they could do something here. And that was a real innovative move from the Giro to have those great short stages. Thomas de Gent won one of those. That was a particularly great day. But this year it's just, and yeah, the weather has played a major role, but it's just been a bit meh. I don't know. It's great to see Healy and Toms and Derek G playing these central roles, but it's it's kind of, it feels like week 4 to me.
I just can't agree with you guys. Like, I have loved this Giro, and granted, there are not words to describe how gutted I am about Theo, because I truly believe that he was going to win this Giro. He has not looked this good since he won the Giro in 2020, and he's arguably better this year, stronger than he was that year. So as our colleague Kate said, I was looking forward to him winning a Giro without an asterisk next to it, kind of proving that he is the GC rider that I think the UK has always forced him into being. But I'm gutted about Theo. But I still think it's been a really exciting race because it's not all about the GC, and I feel like for this race we're going to walk out of this race with a dozen riders on our radar that weren't before the race. And I think that like this Derek G guy, I'm obsessed. This is his first year in the World Tour, and he has absolutely dominated the breakaways. Like, he's been so consistent. It is incredible how consistent he's been. And he's like, he's like so close to winning a stage. He's one different bike throw. maybe one relegation away from winning a stage. Like, he's so close. And I just think that I'm so excited to watch how he does in the future. And there's other riders like Nico Denz has been super exciting. Him winning 2 stages is a huge deal. I think that this race is not, maybe the GC battle so far has been pretty boring. Or I guess just disappointing, and that we lost 2 of the biggest GC contenders, not even like for racing. They didn't drop out of the GC because of a actual racing thing. It was like a avoidable crash and arguably avoidable COVID. So it's not, that's a bummer. But I find this race exciting because of how the riders are tackling it day to day. And I want to keep tuning in day to day because every single day has been super exciting. And I think the GC is going to heat up in the final weeks, like in the final week. The way that the race is built, it was always going to be a boring GC battle in the first 2 weeks. The only GC day we had was the day that was shortened because of the weather, the one that was shortened to like 74K. That would have been a GC battle for sure. But, it's Italy in May. You kind of got to figure that there's going to be weather involved in the race. And so I feel like, I just don't agree. I don't agree with your takes.
I think we should. There are so many things to talk about with these breakaway battles. I think there are some stages that we can break down a little bit more closely to, particularly today's stage, Sunday's stage, as we are recording this. And let's return to the GC conversation as we look ahead, because I think that's where as you said, Abby, it was always going to be a big final week. I think I was hoping a little bit more for some action on week 2. I mean, we had this sort of mini Lombardia, and particularly, the stage that got shortened, we might have gotten, the weather may have robbed us of a bigger battle because there would have been more climbing in the stage to Switzerland. So let's come back to the GC battle, just to set the scene, though, as we head into the second rest day here. As you said, Cosmo, Geraint Thomas gave up the jersey to Bruno Armorai, who leads by 1 minute and 8 seconds over Thomas. And then there's a couple of riders really close together. Primož Roglič just 2 seconds back from Thomas, and then Joao Almeida, and then Andreas Lichtenstein doing his best to hold on. And that's where we are heading into the second rest day. We'll come back to that situation as we look ahead to the final week. But let's break down some of these breakaway battles. First of all, I wanted to point out, Abby, you were talking about how impressive Derek G has been consistently getting into the breakaway. And I just kind of wanted to continue on that topic because it's something that is, I don't know how much is talked about, how hard it is to get into a breakaway on so many days in a row, or just in general, so many days in a race. It is such a crapshoot. I mean, you battle in the first hour trying to get into that move, and so often you got a big group of great riders who get off the front, and it doesn't go. And so if you're able to get into the breakaway that does go the distance multiple times, it's just really impressive. So it's been Derek G, it's been Ben Healy, it's been Tom Scoinch, has continually been up there over and over again. It's really impressive. It's so hard to do that when it's so much of a crapshoot. It's so hard to do that and be up there every day. Nico Denz. So hats off to all those guys for continuously being able to contend in those races, even if they don't end up winning the stage. It's just getting that early break, which we don't often see because maybe it's not televised in some races, or because it's early as hell if you're in the United States. It's just really impressive to see that sort of performance over and over again.
Yeah, I just want to point out, Derek G, this 25-year-old Canadian, first year racing in the World Tour. He was on Israel Cycling Academy last year, so the development part of the Israel Premier Tech team. He's been in the breakaway 4 times this race, and every single time the breakaway has succeeded. So it's his first year in the World Tour, and he has second, fourth, second at the Giro. And that is so cool. And it's not just the Canadian in me that's excited. Well, maybe it is. But it's just really exciting to see. I think before this, the Canadian that everyone knows, right, is Mike Woods. But I see us walking out of this Giro next week, a week from today, and being like, that Derek G guy.
What's a real shame for him, though, is that now he's a marked man, even though he hasn't won anything yet. So if he gets into a break next week, everyone's going to be watching him, and he's going to have way more competition. And it's the same with Fred Wright at things like the Tour de France. If they get into a breakaway, oh, hang on, we can't let him go. But they haven't actually won something. They haven't won one of those big events yet. So I'm really itching for him to get that win as soon as possible. Because obviously he deserves it. I know you can't give them an honourable win. And if, as some people were saying, when Nico Denz slapped him in the face in a metaphorical piece of gold for journalists, which I managed to restrain myself from using. But if he'd been handed that as a relegation from being, accosted on the finish line, he would have hated that, probably. He wouldn't have, I mean, maybe he wouldn't, I don't know, I'm not a professional cyclist, I can't say. But when he was in a sprint, and it was a well-contested sprint, Nico Denz didn't do anything wrong, he just maybe celebrated a little early. That wouldn't have been what he wanted, but I so wanted G to win that. Obviously, if Thomas wasn't going to, but having been caught, it's agonising to watch him, and to watch him go from elation in his second place to devastation in his third. Yeah, it's hard.
I want to talk about Thibaut Pinot first before we break down specifically today's stage, because there was a lot of action in the finale today, which was just really entertaining. I root for Thibaut Pinot. I mean, I am rooting for him at this Giro. In his final season, I'd like to see him have some success. I wasn't, but by the end of the stage, we're talking here about the shortened stage 13, where Pinot was in the breakaway. He was up the road with a handful of other riders and then got clear, and it was Pinot and Cepeda from EF and Rubio from Movistar who ended up contesting the stage. By the end of that day, although I am rooting for Pinot to maybe have a stage win, I can't say I was really rooting for him at the end of that day. He was if you didn't watch, I don't know that I've ever seen anybody complain and shout at his breakaway companions more than I saw Thibaut Pinot do that on stage 13, because he didn't feel like, and they weren't, he didn't feel like his companions were working as much as him. One of the reasons that they weren't doing that is because he was working, you might say, too much.
He was attacking them a lot.
Yeah. And I think it's a completely fair and reasonable thing to use your social abilities to influence others to ride. If you want to shout at them as part of your tactics to make them ride more, then more power to you. That's what makes cycling great. But what also makes cycling great is that you can just sit on and let somebody else wear themselves out. And I kind of felt like it tipped from being smart, pressuring your rivals into maybe doing more work, into the, okay, Thibaut, it's like too much. You got to stop.
We were just watching him lose himself a bike race.
Yeah, he was going nuts. He was just gesticulations every 30 seconds. So yeah, I can't really say that I was rooting for him on that stage to win. In the end, Einer Rubio from Movistar caught back on to Pinot and Cepeda and left them behind in the finish. And he was the one who really, he kept his head down all day. He wasn't really the target of Thibaut Pinot's criticism. That was Cepeda. He had been kind of left behind. And then at the very, very end, when it really mattered, he came through and won the stage, and I was kind of happy about it. Maybe Thibaut will have another opportunity some other day, but yeah, it was too much complaining.
Am I wrong? But was he quoted after the stage saying he didn't care, he just wanted Cepeda to not win? I'm also curious, does Vogler still do commentary for France 2, France 3, whatever the French broadcaster is, assuming they. I want to know if there is Vogler commentary, what he said about this, because this was peak, throwing the toys out of the pram, as they said, Thomas Vogler. Just the constant gesticulations and then the attack for no reason other than they're upset. It was really something to watch, and I felt a little bad for Pinot because I do like him. I enjoyed watching him, but he definitely crossed the line from entertaining to all right, I no longer want this rider to win.
Pinot did say that, by the way. I'm reading the story right now. He
okay.
Did say that.
He's living his best life, man. It's all about him and his goats.
So, and Cepeda didn't win, so at least he got that out of the day.
Yep.
Pinot got that out of the day. Rubio did. But yeah, it was entertaining, at least. At the very least, it was fun. It was entertaining to watch. It just made me really not want Pinot to win as much as I would have normally wanted him to win. Bouncing ahead to today's stage, Sunday's stage, where there was another very intriguing finale with multiple riders sharing work, not working, attacking each other. And today's stage, it was at the very front of the race, Ben Healy, Brandon McNulty, and kind of on and off again, depending on when you checked in the final 10 kilometers. That duo was or was not joined by Marco Frigo from Israel Premier Tech. And I thought it was just a masterclass from McNulty to tactically play that, where he put in a pretty big dig. It was sort of like an oops attack, or like a, okay, fine, I'll do that attack when he did it. He'd kind of gone to the other side of the road, and Healy and Frigo were together, and McNulty realized he had a small gap, and then he tried to push the advantage. So he did put in an attack. Healy chased him down, and that was kind of it for McNulty putting in big attacks. And after that, he sat on in a way that I thought was very intelligent. He let Healy do most of the attacking from that point on, and they did leave Frigo behind for a bit, and then Frigo rejoined them. And then in the very, very end, in the finale, it was McNulty who was freshest, and I think that was due to him being tactically really smart. I think we generally expected Healy to have a better sprint. It would have been close, but I think I was expecting Healy to have a faster sprint, but I think Healy was spent. He had done too much attacking, he had done too much chasing, and at the end of the day, McNulty, the racecraft was, A+ on that one.
The other thing about McNulty was he was so patient, and he was quoted after the stage as saying that he knew that Frigo was coming back. So he sat on Healy's wheel in the finishing straight, knew that Frigo was desperately clawing his way back to the front, and then used Frigo's momentum, McNulty did, to launch his sprint in a slipstream to then obviously take the win. And so it was confident, it was patient, it was strong. That you don't often, that's a story that you get in the third time that somebody's tried to win a Grand Tour stage.
Yes. And
this was his first attempt. I don't know. Well, I know it's his first Grand Tour win, but it's his first Grand Tour stage win. But it also feels like this was a guy who's been here for several years doing that sort of effort. But it just felt really, smart. And yeah, like he's been watching racing as well as racing.
I thought all three of them rode really pretty well tactically. I think Healy kind of knows that he isn't the best sprinter around. We saw him in, what was it? One of the earlier kind of semi-classics, as people say, though I hate that term, where he just, he was riding hard. He was trying to get rid of everybody. He got rid of all but one person and was like, well, I'm going to lose this sprint now. But he put in a really good attack. He kind of waited to the very top of the last big climb while everyone else had kind of done some stuff, and he opened up a gap. And McNulty had to work pretty hard, worked really smart to bring it back, but it took him a while to get back on terms. And then again, when they had the kind of the final climb into the old Bergamo town center, Healy was very kind of past the obvious attack points and put in a big dig that finally distanced Frigo. And I thought Frigo did a great job coming back. He definitely I think there was going to be a little bit of tactical considerations between Healy and McNulty in the finish, so I think he could be pretty confident he would come back, but really came off the wheels of the camera motos that were there. They weren't really pacing him. They happened to be at the end of the race. They hadn't diverted yet. Came up with a good head of speed and carried the lead, I think, into the final 200 meters. It was pretty close, and when Healy went, he didn't make it easy for McNulty. He got up into his space a little bit. I don't think they've quite bumped, but there was enough that if McNulty wasn't quite paying attention or tapped the brakes, he still could have taken the stage. So yeah, it was a really cool finish. It was great. I would love to see it in actual Lombardy instead of the Lombardy version of the Giro d'Italia, but we've officially passed that talking point, so I will not delve in any further.
I mean, hey, we may get that in a few months, so could happen. But yeah, I think that's a good point. Everybody did seem to have pretty good tactics today. I mean, McNulty was the one who won, but I don't think you could really heavily criticize anyone for this or that mistake. I felt like everybody did what they could have, and in the end, I think McNulty just did it better.
Yeah, and it's very easy to look at the profile and think, okay, so there are obvious places to try and attack, and particularly as we've seen what Ben Healy did on stage 8, attack really early on a climb, use his strength to just go. But I don't think he was expecting to go and stay away when he attacked on the flat between the last two classified climbs. But he was really starting to get the racing going. And I think what we've learned when he's in his interviews, he's a very smart racer as well, and he's not. He's obviously quite new to the World Tour, but he's got a very mature head on his shoulders, and it shows, I think, in his racing.
Abby is smiling.
Yeah, I got distracted. I started laughing.
I was just looking into Derek G.
He's a bird watcher.
And he's a birder.
Yeah.
He really loves birding.
I wondered.
What a character.
Is
Sorry.
birding what the Americans call bird watching? Or is that just...
Yes.
Maybe.
Okay, because it's just bird watching here.
I feel like you hear both here.
Isn't sure.
Speaking of breakaways, I find it super interesting that they've given away the pink jersey not once but twice in this Giro. I think it's something you see pretty frequently when there's a time trial that kind of is dominated by the potential GC favorites of the race overall, who takes the lead maybe too early in the race for the team to be able to defend it all the way through, or they just don't want to. So it's pretty common we see the leader's jersey handed over temporarily to someone who's not in the GC conversation in the first week, but in the second week, that is not something we see. And the breakaway on stage 14 with the Frenchman Bruno Emerel, he's like, the face he made on the podium was amazing. He was just like, how did this happen? And he defended it on the stage on Sunday. So it's just like so hilarious.
Yeah, who expected the pink jersey to be chasing back on his own at the beginning of stage 15 of the Giro d'Italia?
Nobody. Surprise.
So I kind of along the same lines or similar lines. I think that all these riders who've really been animating this second week, the Derek G's, the Tom Scoinches, all these guys, Healy, I think they need to bring back the Inter Giro so they have a competition to contest. They may need to so forever from 1989 to 2005, 6, somewhere in there. There was a like mini Giro within the Giro where there was a intermediate finish line and a separate set of intermediate sprints, and they basically just stopped the GC for the Inter Giro GC, that is, at these finish lines. So you had a lot of breakaway specialists who weren't necessarily good at climbing or sprinting, kind of fighting for this Giro within a Giro. They didn't even bother trying to explain it when they had the Giro on American cable TV during the very peak of the Lance bubble. They're like, and there's the Inter Giro, but it's too confusing, so we won't talk about it. But I think it actually gave a good kind of mini GC for riders who are really animating the race to kind of hold and trade off and fight for. And you get, the prestige of standing up on the podium at the end of every stage. And it's kind of cool. Yeah, it's a little confusing, but at the same time, like, I think it would be really fun if Derek G had a cool Inter Giro jersey to wear, or any of the other people who were like, battling and they could get in the break, but they weren't necessarily going to be able to challenge for the stage win. They could try to take that jersey off him. Like I feel like that sort of battle would really do a lot to sort of assuage my concerns about the overall GC that we're seeing here. And the Giro has a ton of weird intermediate prizes already, but I don't think any of them get a jersey. I'm also kind of not a huge fan of young rider classifications because it's been a while since a young rider was meaningfully not contesting GC, although we have that now. So, I love the Inter Giro. They should totally bring it back. It'd be awesome.
It wouldn't be unique in the modern calendar either, because I'm pretty sure the UAE Tour or the Saudi Tour has a black jersey for the intermediate sprints classification, which of course is basically a breakaway classification. So that, yeah, I would be well up for that. I would sign the petition.
All right, Malro. I'm sure Malro Venue listens to this podcast. I'm certain of it. And maybe he'll take that into account. Bring back the Inter Giro. All right, before we close things out with what's up ahead and the GC battle to come, a quick note on some news that may or may not be coming. News that by the time you listen to this, you will know what the news is. But as of Sunday afternoon, all we know is the scuttlebutt on the social media is that Mark Cavendish is going to announce his retirement. But we don't know for certain whether that's going to happen yet. So we can't talk too much about it. He has announced a press conference. There's a report that it's happening. that's kind of all we know for now. So just, stay tuned for other podcasts like The Placeholders, or go over to escapecollective.com and read about it, because if Mark Cavendish announces his retirement, then there's going to be a story up on that website written by, well, I don't know, Johnny, Kaylee, Kit, myself, one of us will be doing that story. So stay tuned for that news. We just don't have it yet.
I think, well, when I first saw the news this morning, there was a part of me that thought, is this a lost in translation? He's leaving on the rest day to go and prepare for the Tour de France, where he's going to get his 35th stage win if he wants. Well, if he can get a bit better at sprinting. So I think he's 10:38 today. Happy birthday, Mark Cavendish. But so it would make sense, and he's on a 1-year contract. So I think there's a very good chance we are going to see him announce his retirement. Also, you wouldn't announce a press conference if you were just going to leave the Giro. So I think the news is what it says it is. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, is this coming as a surprise? Or I feel like everybody was on the same page during Cav Watch this spring. Like he basically signed to Astana to win one Tour de France stage and then retire. And we all know this. Does it need a rest day press conference? Like, I don't know.
I felt like I knew Alejandro Valverde was going to retire 5 years ago, and he didn't.
Yeah.
Okay. But there wasn't a big like Alejandro Valverde like. No one got mysteriously fired for no apparent reason so that Valverde could come over to their team, right? This was very much a like, let's get Cav into a spot where he can win this magical stage and shake hands with Eddie Merckx and etc. I don't know. When I first read it, I was like, he's retiring now. Like he's decided he's not good enough to win the final stage, this record-setting Tour de France stage. But no, we'll see what happens at the press conference. I just think it's like, yeah, we know.
Yeah, my slight journalistic gripe is just, why announce it that you're having a press conference that it's probably going to be this? And we have to wait 24 hours to announce the news that we already know.
You got to build that hype, Kit. You got to get as many people. You got to draw them in.
Yeah, but the headline is Mark Cavendish may be about to announce his retirement. He's 38 years old. Yeah, that's it.
That's two stories he gets out of it, though. So,
Well, yeah, I suppose.
All right, let's talk about the week to come before we close things out, because there's a lot of action, we hope, to come. I'll preface this, we hope, with a reference real quick to a story that El País ran, the Spanish newspaper today, which I just really loved the
They didn't hold back.
They did not hold back. A very forthright. I sent the headline to Cosmo. A very direct commentary on what the author Carlos Arribas thought of the race so far. So translating here from the Spanish, but basically the tweet essentially said of today's stage, where McNulty won, that McNulty won a stage in a Giro, quote, in which the favorites remain paralyzed by fear, and then it went on to say that. Basically, today, the attacks off the front were the thing that were saving us from, quote, another day of laziness is one way to translate this word, from Thomas Roglic and company. So, man, El País, Spanish newspaper, which does a good job of covering the bike racing, usually a very, very strong opinion from Carlos Arribas.
He's not wrong, though.
He isn't wrong.
I mean, I think the GC riders are paralyzed by fear of the third
Yeah,
week.
but laziness? I mean, that's wet. Strong. Yeah,
Yeah, that is...
Paralyzed by fear is one thing, but to say that they are paralyzed by desidia, which is like idleness, laziness, I don't know. But we do have a big third week coming up, so hopefully they will awake from their slumber and rise to the occasion to entertain us, because that's what we want. We want them to entertain us. In this final week, we did have weather of impact already. What might have been a big mountain stage to Crans-Montana in Switzerland, there's a chance that could happen again. I mean, we got to say that the weather could impact the rest of the race. It's May, it's Italy. It has been snowing a lot, but as we come out of the rest day, immediately they're going to have an opportunity for some GC action on a stage to Monte Bondone, which ends with a first category climb that is very long to Monte Bondone. That may give us an opportunity to see some action. We'll see. And then stage 18, another big opportunity for some action. That one is going to take riders higher into the mountains, although not so much of a hard finishing climb, because stage 19 is really the non-time trial GC finale, if you will. They're going to finish at Trecime de Lavaredo, and that final climb, very steep. And as if that wasn't enough for you, the Stage 20 mountain time trial to Monte Lusari is going to give us one last opportunity. As hill climb TTs go, this one is extremely steep. There is a very long stretch in the double digits on that Stage 20 TT hill climb finish. So 3 to 4 potential big GC days, we hope. Hopefully weather will not intervene. Hopefully the climbs will be enough to inspire the riders, the Geraint Thomases and the Primoz Rogliches and maybe the Joao Almeidas, to wake up and go for it before the race ends in Rome with a potential sprint stage. So before we finally close things out, I did want to kind of just have one last conversation about maybe what it is that each of these riders can do, how they can kind of rely on each of their skill sets to out-race the others, because the gaps are so small right now that it's really anyone's guess how things play out. I think it's pretty clearly Roglic and Thomas are the two favorites, and then Almeida with maybe Lecterson, who knows. That's what it seems like at the moment. And for me, I think it's sort of a question of the Ineos Grenadiers team strength, because they have so many riders lurking around the top 10 that they could potentially really use that. I don't know that they will. That might be too exciting for them. I hope they will. Versus Primoz Roglic, who I think he can use his descending skills on some of these days. That to me is really where he stands out a little bit. Because on the climbs and the time trials, I would think that at his best, he and Thomas are pretty closely matched. I don't know. Thoughts?
I think we're definitely going to, obviously, I think it's obvious, we're going to see the pink jersey change hands on Tuesday. So, yes, we're going to have some GC action, because I think at this point they are going to want to take the pink jersey and be able to look after it rather than try and chase it. But I don't think anything's going to happen until that last climb. I think the big day is going to be Friday, which is mostly at altitude. And, even when they come down, they don't come down that far. They're up over 1,200 meters for most of the day. But yeah, I mean, I with Thomas and Roglic, we haven't seen much. I mean, we've seen them match each other, but only in the space of a few kilometers. So we actually don't really know how they how they balance each other out. And I think Joao Almeida is probably, he's only 20 seconds behind Roglic, 22 seconds behind Thomas. I think he should be considered as one of the top three, as he kind of is. But I would not be at all surprised if it comes down to a hill climb on Saturday. If they watch each other and struggle to make an impact on Friday, and then we just get some big action on the penultimate day.
A hope being, I think, that they, at best, they struggle and not watch each other.
No, absolutely.
I want to see them struggle. I don't want to see them watch each other.
Some huge action from like the first climb of the day on Friday, and they kind of crawl across the finish line,
Great.
And they're still spaced out by 15 seconds for the final day, for the penultimate day time trial. And we get it that way, and they are just on their knees. I want that element of attrition that we've had for the past 2 weeks to continue, and for us to have small gaps because they've raced, not because they have defended.
I'm really intrigued with how well Thomas and Roglic match up on paper. Like I mentioned it last week, but when Thomas was winning towards de France, he was winning them with big efforts inside the final kilometers, which is how Roglic has really ridden in a lot of the 1 week stage races. They both time trial really well. And I feel like, maybe it's in my head, but I feel like I've seen them kind of looking at each other a little bit in some of these finishes where the headwinds have kind of kept the attacks down. Just kind of, staring and looking back, making sure they're not doing too much work, but they're not, no one else is trying to do something else. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for Almeida in there. Just that kind of staring contest. He can be aggressive. He can take chances and find seconds where those two are too busy worried about each other.
Yeah, to me, that's exactly his best chance is to do that. And we've seen that happen a lot in one-day races. That happens all the time in one-day races. It doesn't happen as often in GC races, but it would be really cool to see Almeida at least give something a go, maybe as those two are watching each other, and we'll find out.
Hopefully Roglic will have learned from when Carapaz won the Giro a few years ago. But who knows?
So it's all to play for. Into the third week of the Giro d'Italia. Hope we're entertained. Hopefully they'll ride in a way that makes Cosmo less likely to be unhappy and less likely to pine for the days of the Intergiro. we'll see. We'll have to find out.
You could pine for the days of the Intergiro, even in a tightly contested.
That's a good point. We can have it.
It's called the Intergiro. It's such a cool name.
Yeah. All right. So we've got that to look forward to. Lots of racing to come here in the final week of the Giro d'Italia. In between now and the next time we see you, we will have an opportunity to listen to Wheel Talk with Abby, of course. I hope, right, Abby? Yes?
I don't know who else would do it. Myself and Matt Denise and Gracie Elvin will gather together to discuss more of Burgos and also do a preview of Ride London, which is this weekend.
It's going past my parents' front door.
Goes right by Kit's parents' front door.
In historic.
And there's no SD Works.
Essex.
Okay. So we've got Wheel Talk to look forward to. We've got Geek Warning to look forward to. And there will be a placeholders, as usual, before we are back next week to talk about what happened in the final week of the Giro. Maybe talk about whether Mark Cavendish is retiring. We'll find out. Talk about Ride London. Lots to look forward to this week. I hope you have a chance to watch the bike racing, and I'm just thrilled that you listened to us today. Thanks for joining us on the Pretty Serious Bike Racing Podcast, and as ever, thanks Cosmo, thanks Abby, thanks Kit. Great to talk to you all, and we'll see you again for another episode. Until then, bye.